Battle of Britain 1969 wasn't made, it was survived. People today look at its sweeping dogfights and think, wow, that's impressive. But the truth is, if the production had gone on any longer, the studio might have had to crowdfund oxygen masks for the insurance team. This movie didn't rely on computers or CGI. It relied on actual vintage aircraft, a director who believed safety protocols were optional suggestions, and a cast of actors who slowly realized they had signed on to something far more chaotic than they expected. Entire towns were evacuated, explosions shook the countryside, tempers flared, governments got stressed, and somewhere in the middle of it all, a member of the royal family quietly joined in. And yet, audiences only saw the polished final product. They didn't see the near disasters, the shouting matches, the political bargaining, or the moments that genuinely made the crew question whether the movie would ever finish, or whether they would. So let's go behind the clouds and dive into 15 weird, wild, and occasionally ridiculous facts about Battle of Britain 1969, including one at the end that still sounds made up even though it absolutely happened.
Fact 15. The sky wasn't CGI. It was real danger, real pilots, and real, we hope this works. Modern film crews talk about practical effects like they're setting off a sparkler in someone's garden. Battle of Britain used practical effects in the sense that they put pilots into fragile, decades-old fighter planes and told them to fly in tight formation while cameras rolled and everyone hoped nobody forgot which lever did what. The film used over 100 real aircraft, which even today is mind-blowing. But in the 1960s, it was unheard of. Collectors loaned out their privately restored Spitfires, some reluctantly, as if handing their newborn to a stranger and saying, "Please don't scratch it." Many of the pilots were actual WW2 veterans, men who had flown these machines for real. When producers asked whether the flying conditions felt dangerous, one veteran reportedly replied, "Dangerous? Son, this is what we called Tuesday." During one scene, two planes clipped wings in a low-altitude pass. One pilot ejected, the other crash-landed, and everyone held their breath. After both men survived, the crew realized the pilot who crash-landed was more annoyed about damaging the aircraft than nearly dying. The insurance team filed what was likely the longest internal email of their careers. Director Guy Hamilton? He shrugged, straightened his scarf, and said, "We're refighting the war. What do they expect?" If health and safety departments existed back then, this movie would have been shut down at Fact 14. Fact 14. Franco's Spanish Air Force played the Nazis, and villagers were very confused. Finding Luftwaffe aircraft in 1969 was like trying to find a working rotary phone in a nightclub today. Impossible unless you knew the right dictator. Spain under Franco still operated Messerschmitts and Henkelbaumers, so the production struck a deal to rent the planes and the pilots. Yes, the pilots came included, like a very unsettling bundle offer. For several weeks, southern Spain saw fully marked German aircraft overhead, swastikas, uniforms, everything. Local farmers froze mid-field work. One villager reportedly asked a crew member, "Are we doing the war again, or is it just a rehearsal?" Spain had demands. Don't portray Germany as heroic. Don't forget to credit the Spanish pilots. An odd set of requests, but it was a unique political situation. The weirdest part? Some of the Spanish pilots descended from families who had actually flown for the Luftwaffe and WW2. Imagine showing up to work and thinking, well, Granddad would be proud, I guess? Flying scenes looked so convincing that British newspapers joked the filmmaker should send Spain a bill for emotional distress.
Fact 13. Laurence Olivier hated his role and made sure everyone knew it. Sir Laurence Olivier played Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, a man known for calm leadership, strategic thinking, and not much else in terms of cinematic excitement. Olivier, however, was a man who liked emotional speeches, dramatic posture, and the occasional spotlight. Instead, he was handed a script that involved mostly sitting, waiting for information, and looking deeply concerned. He complained openly,
I'm just sitting here waiting for reports. Guy Hamilton answered with the directness of a man who had already lost 3 battles with his insurance company. Yes, that's what he did. Olivier wanted Dowding to be more expressive. Hamilton wanted Dowding to be Dowding. Both men stood firm. Eventually, Olivier delivered a performance full of quiet authority, much to his annoyance, and left the set irritated for weeks. Critics later praised the performance as one of Olivier's most restrained and effective. He probably rolled his eyes every time someone said that. Fact 12. The film nearly bankrupted its studio, literally. If you think movies today go over budget, Battle of Britain spent money like it was trying to speed-run bankruptcy. United Artists and producer Harry Saltzman poured in millions for restoration, aerial fuel, authentic uniforms, rebuilding 1940s airfields, evacuating entire towns, pyrotechnics that probably shook a few hedgehogs out of hibernation. By 1969 standards, $14 million was enormous, equivalent to over $120 million today. Some sets were so large you could see them from miles away. Crews built full-scale buildings just to destroy them again. Extras filled entire airfields. Weather delays cost days of filming. Spain wanted extra compensation. Ireland wanted permission paperwork in triplicate. At one point, the studio executives sat down and realized the production had become the financial version of a dogfight. They were steadily losing altitude. European ticket sales salvaged things, though just barely. Saltzman later joked the film was almost the war the studio lost.
Fact 11. RAF veterans actually walked off set in protest. To ensure accuracy, the production invited real RAF veterans as advisors, which sounds great until you remember veterans tend to have strong opinions. Problems began immediately. One veteran objected to the composite characters, saying, "We didn't blend into one man with a strong jawline." Another protested that the film showed women in clerical roles instead of code-breaking or fairy flying. A third refused to tolerate a scene showing pilots drinking before a mission. "We didn't drink before flying, we prayed," he shouted. When director Guy Hamilton tried to explain dramatic license, the room temperature reportedly dropped several degrees. Some veterans left entirely. Others stayed, but crossed their arms so tightly it was a wonder their shoulders survived. Decades later, surviving RAF pilots watched the film again and admitted the flying sequences were so realistic they were genuinely emotional, even if the paperwork scenes still annoyed them. Fact 10. A real mid-air collision nearly ended everything. During one of the film's most elaborate dogfight sequences, 2 vintage aircraft collided mid-air. One pilot managed to eject with only seconds to spare. The other brought a damaged plane down in a field, climbed out, brushed off the dust, and said something very British like, "Well, that was unpleasant." Filming stopped. Insurance panic reached critical mass. Studio executives reportedly considered shutting down the entire production then and there. Hamilton refused. He insisted the flying continue, though perhaps with slightly fewer near-death experiences. The pilots agreed to return, proving they were either incredibly brave or contractually trapped. This is the part of the video where I meant to remind you to like and subscribe, because if those pilots survive this, the least we can do is click a button.
Fact 9. The cast was a who's who of British legends before they were legends. The film quietly assembled an ensemble cast that would later become household names: Michael Caine, Christopher Plummer, Trevor Howard, Susanna York, Ian McShane, and Robert Shaw. It was like a talent incubator disguised as a war movie. Michael Caine later joked you could smell the testosterone on set. Tensions sometimes bubbled over, especially between Robert Shaw and Christopher Plummer, who reportedly clashed over acting styles. Their scenes, unsurprisingly, feel wonderfully sharp because the frustration behind them was very real. Looking back, it feels like the film accidentally created a British cinema Avengers team, minus the capes and billion-dollar budgets. Fact 8. The director came straight from Goldfinger and brought Bond-style chaos with him. Guy Hamilton arrived from directing Goldfinger, which explains why Battle of Britain occasionally feels like someone tried to give James Bond a squadron of fighter planes. Hamilton's style was bold, loud, and slightly allergic to compromise. When the Ministry of Defense complained about certain scenes, Hamilton refused to soften them. When government officials suggested removing references to tactical blunders, he said, "If we tell it too clean, it becomes a recruitment commercial." At one point, the MOD threatened to revoke access to RAF bases. The filmmakers stood firm, and after days of tense negotiations, filming continued. It turns out arguing with a government is surprisingly similar to arguing with a studio, except one has jets.
Fact 7. Real Spitfires were found hidden in barns across Europe. By the late 1960s, authentic Spitfires were almost extinct. Some were scrapped, others forgotten, and a handful were kept in barns by eccentric collectors. So the production launched a continent-wide hunt. France, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, and the Netherlands. One aircraft was reportedly found under hay bales on a Belgian farm, like the world's most patriotic Easter egg. Restoring these aircraft to flying condition took months. Mechanics described the process as bringing ghosts back to life. When engines finally roared to life, the crew gathered around like they were witnessing a resurrection. Every engine sound in the film? Real. Every vibration? Real. Every moment the pilots looked slightly terrified? Also real. Fact 5. A secret royal flew in the movie. Hidden among the pilots was Prince William of Gloucester, a cousin of Queen Elizabeth II. He was an experienced aviator and volunteered to fly non-combat sequences in a Spitfire. The palace insisted zero publicity because letting a royal fly a 25-year-old fighter plane during a chaotic film shoot was, understandably, not something they wanted broadcast. William handled the plane with calm confidence. One crew member said he looked like he'd been flying it since childhood. After his tragic death in later flying accident, his appearance in Battle of Britain became a quiet, emotional footnote in aviation history. Fact 4. The explosions were so intense they damaged real homes. To recreate the Blitz, the filmmakers didn't rely on miniatures. They built full-scale sets and detonated explosives large enough to be felt miles away. Residents in nearby towns were evacuated. Some ignored the warnings. Those who stayed behind later complained about cracked windows, shaking roofs, and frightened pets. One cow reportedly refused to produce milk for a full day after a particularly loud blast. Christopher Plummer said, "It felt like we were standing in hell." And considering the heat, smoke, and debris raining down, that wasn't hyperbole. Several fires broke out accidentally, including a hedge that burned for hours until fire crews stepped in. For the record, all of this was cheaper than creating realistic CGI today.
Fact 3. Michael Caine almost quit after his uniform caught fire. Michael Caine expected a controlled, polished production. Instead, he got a year of delays, unpredictable weather, and explosions that apparently had a personal vendetta against clothing. During a test for a ground explosion, Caine's uniform briefly caught fire. He stormed off the set furious, telling crew members he wouldn't return. Guy Hamilton visited him at his hotel that night. They had a long discussion, argued a little, laughed a little, and eventually agreed to adjust Caine's character to give him more emotional range. Caine returned the next morning, slightly singed, but professionally intact. Fact 2. The movie managed to anger both sides of history. German veterans said the film demonized their pilots. British officials felt it portrayed RAF leadership as flawed and occasionally incompetent. Spain said the Nazi scenes were too realistic despite providing the planes and uniforms. Several scenes were cut for being too graphic, including a haunting aerial sequence that supposedly shows pilots burning alive. The footage hasn't been publicly released and may still be sitting in a private archive. Historians later praised the film for refusing to sanitize the air war. It shows fear, exhaustion, and the emotional collapse beneath the victory. The result? Everyone was slightly offended, which usually means a film told the truth. Fact 1. The final shot hides a secret tribute. The closing shot, clouds drifting across an empty sky, wasn't originally planned. Hamilton added it after days of debate about how to end the film. Look closely at the faint contrails in the distance. They form 303, a subtle tribute to the Polish 303 Squadron, whose bravery was instrumental in the real battle. Most viewers never noticed. Hamilton later confirmed the tribute in an interview, saying it was his way of thanking pilots who never got enough recognition. It's a quiet goodbye, written not in words, but in vapor. Bonus fact: the film revived a real aviation restoration movement. After Battle of Britain came out, aviation enthusiasts across Britain were inspired to rescue forgotten World War II aircraft. Old hangars reopened, wrecks were pulled from swamps, collectors funded restorations. By the mid-1970s, more Spitfires were flying than at any time since the 1950s. The movie didn't just recreate history, it helped bring real pieces of it back to life. If you enjoyed exploring the chaos behind this iconic film, let me know which movie, battle, or forgotten story you want next. And if you want more deep dives into history and classic cinema, hit subscribe. It helps this channel keep flying.